Welcome to the Live with Courage podcast, the show that brings you transition tales and other guests that encourage veterans to define success for themselves. With your host, Christina Herr. Welcome to the Live with Courage podcast. I'm your host, Christina Herr, and today my guest is Otis McGregor. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Christina. Good to meet you, and great opportunity to share a bit of my story and help some folks out.
This is going to be an awesome podcast. I'm super excited. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of do the synopsis because I don't, unless we're going Joe Rogan long format. But I grew up in Texas, went to Texas A&M, Gig 'em Aggies. While I was there, I was in the Corps Cadets. I enlisted. I was a tank driver and then a cavalry scout. Received a commission as an engineer, and then took my beautiful Texas bride with me up to our first duty assignment. And the reason I said up is because it really was up. Fairbanks, Alaska, Fort Wainwright. Welcome to the military, sweetheart. That was a bit of a not the cultural shock, but the environmental shock that, as you could imagine. While there, I volunteered for Green Berets. I spent the rest of my career as a Green Beret and primarily in Intense Special Forces Group. That's what brought us out here to Colorado. And then in 2009, my season in the military had ended. I decided it was time. I was tired. We were tired, not just me, but we were tired of the moves and other things. So I stepped away and I put myself on a path that I thought was like, this is what I should be doing. Because you know what do you do after the military? You get a job. And that's what I did. I got a job. And what I didn't realize was I needed much, much more than a job. I started off with Lockheed Martin. I worked for some other companies doing business development, program management, all kinds of different things. I was even a program manager for data strategy. Green Beret, knuckle dragger, how the heck did I get into that? But I did that. And every one of these jobs, every one of these companies were high quality companies. And every single one of them, about 90 days in, I sat down and I went, man, something ain't right here. It don't feel right. It don't smell right. It don't taste right. And I ended up quitting every one of them within 12 months, except for the last job I had. And this is where you really come to the realization that got a problem, Otis. The last job I had, I was a chief strategy officer for a small business based in Fort Worth, my hometown. So even when going back to the flagpole, I would visit hometown, right? I'm mom and dad, in-laws, all those restaurants and things like that. And I was miserable. I was frustrated and miserable because here's one other thing about it. As a chief strategy officer, nobody knows what you're doing. How do you measure strategy success, right? I'm doing stuff out 5 years. I'm planning, joint partnerships and strategic partnerships and things like that 5+ years down the road. I couldn't fail. And I had carte blanche to do what I wanted to do that I thought was right for the company. And I was miserable, frustrated and miserable, not satisfied. And one summer afternoon, sitting here in my home office, feeling sorry for myself, started scratching my head about what I was supposed to be. Who was I supposed to be? And as I reflected back on my life since leaving the Army, I realized that only two things have been consistent for me: my family and coaching rugby. I started coaching boys high school rugby right after I retired from the Army. I'm kind of in one of those, your kids playing. So you show up for practice. You show up for practice a little bit earlier. You start to talk to the coach. Next thing you know, the coach is like, hey, want to help out? Sure, why not? No clue. I knew what rugby was, but no clue about the game. So became a student of the game, loved it. And as I thought about that, why was that a consistency over those last 7 years? Why had rugby coaching become so consistent and so important in my life? And I broke that down into really three main pieces: the game of rugby, folks, if you don't know about rugby, you got to check it out, because it is an amazing sport, team sport, strategy, physical.
It's very intense.
Oh, it is unbelievable. It's soccer, football, and wrestling all rolled into one game. Unbelievable game. Love it to death. And then it was the boys. You know, my wife and I, we had 35 extra sons every year that would be in and out of our house nonstop.
Oh, I love that thought process.
Oh yeah. Well, I still swear some of them had copies to the front door key. as many times as I'd come home and be like, okay, you know, and I give a shout out to Miss Suzanne, who anytime there was more than one of those boys in the house, she was making chocolate chip cookies. I mean, we loved having those boys here all the time. But what I realized was it was this third element, the coaching, that really helped fulfill me. It was challenging them to do more than they thought they could, holding them accountable for doing what they said they would do, and then pushing them to achieve more. And as I reflected back on that and realized that was the thing that was really starting to fulfill me, or had been fulfilling me unbeknownst to me, I started talking to a couple of my friends. They introduced me to this thing called business coaching. I started to look at business coaching. I met some guys in my network at the second and third level, is what I like to refer to, a second and third level of my network, that were successful business coaches. Got introduced to how you do it, how you run a business like that, and shifted my business into helping others succeed at what they want to succeed at. And when I made that commitment to helping others, like in that mode, helping them achieve their own success, I also made two more commitments in my life. One was to get to know this community, the Colorado Springs community where we live now, a bit more than just a couple of restaurants and bars. Because, you know, I'd over my career in 10th Group, US Northcom, and then working after I retired, we'd been here 15 plus years, and I knew that was about it. A couple of restaurants and a couple of bars. So I made a commitment to get into the community here and meet people. And it's an amazing community. Some of the businesses here are just like, wow, that's cool. And then the third thing I committed to was giving back to the veteran tribe, where I feel like when I look back on my life, that's where I got everything from. All my success, all my knowledge, all my hard knocks, all came in the military and through the veteran community. So I refocused on that. And one of the things that I do is I coach through a couple of nonprofits, the Honor Foundation and the Commit Foundation. I help guide soon-to-be veterans to have a successful transition and create their new adventure in life when they get out of the military. So that to me is, because the last thing I want, it's the last thing I've ever wanted. This has kind of been ingrained in me sometime really early on in life, is to see somebody that made the same mistakes I did, you know, whether it was, you know, when I was playing football in college or in the Army or whatever. I don't want somebody to make the same mistakes I did. So I'm passionate about helping those guys and gals transition successfully in that attitude of being intentional with what they want to achieve and being who they want to be, and learning how to step out of the military culture into something that's very, very different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I kind of want to go back to your initial part of your transition. You said that you changed jobs quite a bit, like within, a year, you would just quit and move on to something else. A lot of people that are transitioning out of the military, they'll get into a job, they'll be miserable, but they'll stay. So I'm wondering if your time in the military, because you did move around a lot, and because in your field, you guys, if it wasn't working, you had to kind of change direction, right? From what I understand. I mean, I'm not a know-it-all on all of that, but it would seem so that if the mission is not working the way it was planned out, you change direction. Do you think that might have played a factor in why you were able to make those changes so rapidly?
I think so. But I will say, and I can't remember, one of my former NCOs that had already retired told me this, and it was one of these, I think one of the most important lessons that you take when you take your uniform off is you get to say no. And because I knew that and I took that to heart, if when things started to not feel right, I just said no. This sucks. I don't know why it sucks. So I'm going to go see if something else doesn't suck as much as this. And you know, the factor of changing jobs in the Army every year to 18 months, that probably contributed to it, where it was just a little bit more natural. But I think it really, that was a huge lesson that I really took to heart. Is if I had a rugby game, a big, it was rugby playoffs, and they wanted me to go to some conference in Tampa, I'd be like, I can't. I'll go for these days of it, but this day, the day of the game or the pregame and then the game or something like that, I got to be here. And I was point blank about that.
So you learned how to say no early on, which is also a very difficult thing that service members, have a hard time with, is kind of thinking for themselves, because we are put in a position where we follow our leaders. We do what we're told. We don't say no. Mission gets done no matter what. So, if somebody is set on a path by a transition counselor or by a previous person they knew, and they're like, hey, this is what I think you should do, they kind of just follow the leader. So I'm glad that you got that advice and you took it to heart, and it led you to your path of purpose. I think is so amazing. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing with that purpose in your life?
Yeah. So my purpose, and I might have had clarity on that day on what I should be doing, but I didn't really have clarity on what my purpose was or is now on that day. And it took some time, and I've refined it some, but now I have clarity on it. And my purpose is to create a legacy of leaders, because I believe that great leaders create great organizations. And when we have great organizations around the community, guess what? They influence the communities to be better. And when we're influencing our communities to be better, we're going to have a better world. And to me, that's my purpose, because it's creating that legacy of leaders for my kids, my grandkids, and on down the road, for people that'll be around long after I'm gone. That's my purpose. It drives me and it excites me to just say it and share it and do that. Now, like I said, it took some time. It took some time to figure that out. But you know what? It was a heck of a lot more enjoyable figuring it out than just going through the motions of going through work. And I tried several things. I have a really good friend of mine that owns a business. They're based in Tampa, and they're doing some work at Northcom. And he calls me up. He's like, Otis, man, we've been looking for ways to work together for years. I think we got the opportunity. Would you talk to these people at Northcom and maybe look at this position? I'm like, all right, sure, buddy, because he and I go way back, like selection days, and I did it as a favor. Sat down, had lunch with the folks. Folks weren't bad, probably could work with them and stuff like that. Then I decided I'll do one final test, and I drove to work. Did my drive to work rehearsal. And I won't say I started breaking out in a rash or hyperventilating, but when I pulled in the parking lot, I couldn't turn the truck around fast enough and get back out the gate to call my buddy and say, this ain't for me, man. It doesn't fit. And I'll digress a little bit into the lesson, because I think what people struggle with, going back to one of the parts of your questions, is they struggle with, well, how do I know? What do I do? Well, you test. And you can test by quitting the job, but you can test by still having the paycheck, because you know what? I don't know about you, but It's kind of nice to have money coming into the bank, to keep the roof over your head and put food on the table, right? I mean, it's kind of nice to have that. Well, so don't just quit your job because it ain't fulfilling your purpose. Figure out what your purpose is and then see if they coexist. Your job may be a means to achievement of your purpose. Not everybody has clarity in their purpose that somebody's going to pay them to do actions in their purpose. There are so many ways to fulfill your purpose that could be a side gig, could be something that you just volunteer for on Sunday mornings. That could be, that juice you get, if you're one of those people that the Sunday morning church just, man, that's it. That hour and a half, those 2 hours, those 3 hours, whatever, and it juices you for the rest of the week. That may very well be your purpose, right?
Yeah, I volunteer a lot, and my friends call me, they say I'm a professional volunteer because I do a lot of stuff for free just because it fills my purpose and it makes me feel amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't it? There's that feeling that you get from nothing else. Another way that I like to help people kind of explore it is we take a step back from our purpose to find what are you passionate about? And passions are those things that you do where you lose track of time. And when you're done doing it, let's say it's a project out in the garage, woodworking project or whatever, right? You're building some shelves or toy box or whatever, and you stop and you still got all this energy because it was just so awesome. But what is it about that? Is it the working with the wood? Is it the power tools? Is it the isolation because you're the only one doing it? I don't know. Everybody looks at it. You figure out those parts and pieces of that passion, and those things can start to help guide you to what your purpose is.
I had two additional things that helped me find my purpose. One was some stories that people told me about myself. When I was really searching for my path of purpose, for some reason, people started messaging me and saying, "Hey, thanks for doing this for me like 20 years ago." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Type of thing. That was one thing. And then the other thing is I either had less obstacles or the obstacles were like easy to tackle. They felt easy, not that they were easy, but they either felt easy or I just noticed that I had less obstacles and more gifts coming my way when I would enter that path of purpose. Now, don't get me wrong, I've gone off and on, a couple of times until I really discovered what it was. But there's just so many things that listening to yourself and those around you that really care about you can really help, find that purpose that you have.
That's so true. One of the things, going back to my experience with rugby, is all those years, I used to tell people that the only reason I work is so that I could coach. And they're like, "Hey, genius, there's an indicator right there. The only reason I'm working at Lockheed or ISS or whoever I was working for at the time was so that I could coach rugby." Maybe that's an indicator.
I've heard that a lot. I just thinking about that just now. I've heard a lot of people say stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, and that goes back to what I was saying. Was I ever going to become a professional rugby coach? That's pretty rough because I'm not a funny talker, right? In the rugby world, apparently you have to be a funny talker to be a good rugby coach. But I'll just translate, meaning you got to be from some other country than America to be a good rugby coach.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't mean like you speak with an impediment or something like that. No,
I thought maybe you had to be witty.
Well, yeah, that helps, but more like British, Kiwi, Aussie, that sort of thing. But it's that aspect of what is it I want to do and what's the reality of it. I never want to tell somebody, no, that's not real, because you have to discover whether or not your purpose, you fulfilling that purpose, is real. So I've never discouraged somebody. No, even when it's like, ooh, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, dude, that's you go right ahead and pursue that purpose. We'll see. Call me back in a little while. But you know what? You never know. You never know. And there is this Japanese philosophy called Ikigai, and it was discovered, founded, probably founded is probably the right word, founded on the island of Okinawa, where karate and Ikigai were founded. And what Ikigai is, simply put, it's a Venn diagram of what are you good at? What do you love to do? What does the world need? And what will people pay you for? You take those four circles and you overlay them, and that overlap in the center is your Ikigai. And man, when you're living in your Ikigai, that's not only is it fun to say, but that's a pretty cool place to be, you know, because that's what you're doing. People are paying you for something you love to do and you're flipping good at it. How cool is that?
I think I need to find mine.
Yeah.
I got to find that little centerpiece. I'm working
It's
on it.
there. It's there. And you know, some of the stories I've read about Ikigai, and one of them that always sticks with me was the guy who thought his Ikigai was, you know, playing a guitar in a band. And as he started to move forward and discovering and playing with different bands, you know, all those night gigs and things like that, he stumbled on time into being behind the stage and being a producer for the show. And he discovered that that was his Ikigai. It wasn't playing the guitar, although he enjoyed playing the guitar, right? I mean, I enjoy going out in the garage and, you know, doing a wood project, something like that. That's not my Ikigai. That, believe me, ain't nobody coming up to the front door and knocking on it and saying, "Hey, Otis, could you make me this, and this?" No, that ain't happening. But what he discovered through that exploration was what his Ikigai really was, and that was production of the music behind the scene. And I'll just throw in that kind of leads me to it's your movement towards something that you believe in that really is so much more enjoyable. Which would you rather do? Would you rather go through the motions during the day, all day, and in the evenings, or go through emotions during the day and then sit on your butt and watch Netflix at night? Or would you rather take a chance on pursuing something that might be your Ikigai, that might be your purpose? Man, I don't know about you, but I'm willing to risk myself on that.
I can look back at a lot of different jobs I had and I can tie it all to empowering others. That was what I found joy in. It wasn't, paper pushing. It wasn't, welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order? It was what I was doing to empower others to be successful while I was doing those jobs. So yeah, I could totally understand, like, my life was moving me along that path the best way that it could, at that time. So I think that's really important to remember.
Yeah, it's about movement. I really really believe that. I mean, and I'll even go back to you know the the troop leading procedures that the Army teaches, and you know issue the warning order, and then the very next thing after we issue the warning order, you know, hey guys, here's what we're going to do is begin movement. Why do you think we begin movement? Because we want to get to the objective and start to get clarity. Because the closer you get to the objective, the clearer the picture of the objective gets. That's why we do that. We don't sit back in the team room and continue to plan. We do the prep work. We issue the warning order. We get out and we move closer to the objective so that we can get clarity to start to execute. So when we have clarity at the end, then we know what to do. But it involves movement.
I think it's important to remember too that for some, we're a little bit further away from the target. We just are. So it takes us a little bit longer. So I used to have this ridiculous idea, which is probably not ridiculous for some, but for me, that I was going to be doing what I was supposed to be doing at like the age of 25. And here I am, 43 years old, and I just discovered my values and my purpose, a couple years ago. So life is a journey, and everybody's journey is different twists and turns, different lengths. different obstacles, different challenges, different successes and gifts and things like that. So I like the individualness of coaching and folks and things like that, so they can better understand what works for them. And I think that's something to remind anybody that's helping, veterans that are transitioning, is it's not a one size fits all transition. So if you're working with veterans, help them find what works for them and what their purpose and passion is, and how to get them to that success. What do you feel about that? Like the individualness of military transition?
It is, everybody's story is different. Everybody came in the Army for the military for different reasons. Everybody got out for different reasons. And transition is individual and it's tenuous. Can transition never is. I'm still transitioning. I've been out, retired 12 years ago. Hard to believe if I did the math right. Somebody help me, public math. But I'm still transitioning. I'm still changing because I've adopted that attitude that I will continue to change to improve and go forward, as opposed to, okay, that's done.
Oh yeah,
Now,
military transition is not the only transition we go in life.
no,
It's just a very big one that they try to, in my opinion, they try to make it the same for everybody. They try to make it this linear, in a box. Here is your guide on how to transition, and it's not working. And I don't
mm,
know why we tackle that transition. It's almost like people telling other people how to parent, or people telling other people, how to be married, or anything like that. Like, I don't know why we try to apply those principles to such dynamic systems and processes in our life. So I just think it's just crazy that we're like, here's your manual on military transition, you will be successful. And then all of these people are not successful. And it contributes to a lot of the issues that we have. And all they do is they blame it on the fact that we're too rigid and too military, or we're screwed up from combat, and I'm like, no, it's because we haven't quite figured out transition.
yeah. Well, but what's amazing now is the resources that are available for transition. When I retired, there was just that one,
I
military.
got out around the same time as you, and I didn't even
Yeah.
have to go to that class. It was an
Oh, you
option.
didn't even, they didn't even make you go. Wow.
No, I had no transition support whatsoever.
Yeah, I did it as a checkbox because I knew I was going to Lockheed Martin. I mean, so you need me to do that so I can get my clearance papers, I'll do it. But now, you know what? I just call it like I believe. If you ain't asking for help, then then please do. Geez, there's so
There's
many.
so many to me it's resource overload, and I
It
think
is.
it's kind of hard to pick the right one now. I think we've gone opposite, where it's like we didn't have any resources and we are out here just figuring it out. And sometimes, honestly, I prefer to figure things out because I learn a lot more from it, and I feel like I get a better, result. But that doesn't mean that I don't know resources and I don't go to resources. It now I feel like there's this resource overload, and it's about choosing the right resources. And that's where, having good mentorship and having good coaches and friends and family that can say, hey, you don't need to go to that resource. You've got that on lockdown, but this is a gap that you have that maybe we need to find a resource for. Because I've gone to a lot of resources and I'm like, and I don't need this. Like, this is not what I thought it was, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. I'm still amazed. I'm a 10th group guy. They're just down the road, and I mean, it doesn't. It takes a little bit of a breeze, and I'll be okay. Sure, I'll show up down there. You need some help down there. It doesn't take anything, right? Uh, and I'm amazed at how few of the guys and gals in that organization don't know about what's available. Just simple things like the Green Beret Foundation. They're one of your neighbors there in San Antonio. Uh, the Commit Foundation, which helps special ops service members transition. The Honor Foundation, same thing. I mean, I've coached a lot of guys that have gone through both the Commit and Honor Foundation, and talk about, I mean, now, is that going to make it where they're going to, knock it out of the park and be 100% happy with, the perfect job, perfect paycheck, the perfect business, whatever, blah, blah, blah? No, but it's going to help them understand how to be intentional in that, as opposed to doing like I did. And, oh, cool, look, I got an offer letter. Must be the job for me, right? I mean, or really, I think what I would do is I'd be like, well, I guess I should counter offer that salary they just offered me. That was about my only discussion on it. Honestly, it wasn't, well, what's that company do? What's the organization like? What's the team that I'm going to be working with like? What's the culture? Where is it? All these
Those
sort
are
of,
things that people don't ask questions about all the time.
yeah,
And if you don't know what's important to you, then you don't know what questions to ask, and you end up very unhappy. I have learned to say no a lot because I have people sending me jobs all the time and they're like, you would be really good at this. Yes, I'd be good at that, but I would be miserable there. I don't care about money. I care about being, my purpose, being able to work my purpose, and I care about autonomy. You know how long it took for me to figure that out? That is a lot of miserableness at work.
and that's one of the things that I teach the fellows that I coach is creating a decision matrix. And the first thing I have every one of them put on the decision maker matrix, the first criteria I have them put down is their values. What are your values? Those first 4 or 5 things need to be right up there at the top. So every time you look at a job or look at a company and compare it, how do your values fit in that job? How do your values fit? Do they align with that organization? Because that was one of the things that was wrong with me, or what I was missing. Because I had my values, I didn't know it, didn't understand that whole process at the time, but I had who I was, my values, and the organizations I was working for weren't necessarily aligned with it. And that was part of that frustration that I didn't understand. So once I started to reflect back and look on it, now I'm able to teach guys this and show them that, hey, you can evaluate before this happens. You can mitigate this. You can narrow it down and mitigate your risk in being in the wrong job. Is it going to be the perfect job? I don't know. Maybe you got a heck of a lot better probability if you're using that decision criteria. And that decision criteria goes from values to, what's the compensation, what's the location, what's the drive time, what's the work hour, all travel, all these sort of things that we kind of, when you're in the military, you take for granted. You just do it, right? Because I signed the dotted line, and if I don't do it, I go to jail. Okay, right? Then I'll do it. It goes back to that understanding that you can say no when you get out. So why not have to say no and make sure it aligns as best as you can, as opposed to this test it out the hard way. I mean, there, again, go back to the movement. Please continue to move forward and test something out. But man, don't just not do it because you're not sure. How about we mitigate that risk, narrow it down, and then only apply to, this job or that job, or only apply in this area. I don't want to work in Dam Neck, Virginia. I only want to work in Newport, Virginia, whatever that may be. So, you know, start figuring it out and eliminating things and narrowing the field down.
So you work with these folks and they have all these this decision matrix that you give them. Do they struggle with that? Because I've had a hard time with some of the folks that I've coached with them, even identifying what their values are.
Mm-hmm. Yes and no. I mean, when it comes down to values, yeah. Now, the Commit Foundation has a great tool that they walk all of our fellows go through. It's an online thing called we call Pursue Your Purpose. The Honor Foundation teaches a class on understanding values and
Oh,
defining them
wow.
and things like that. And
Awesome.
when you get that, I mean, because I'm like, I was the same way. I'm like, values, what's that?
Oh, once I figured out my values, man, my life had just got exponentially easier.
Oh, it does.
Courage and legacy. As long as I'm being courageous and I'm working towards something that's going to leave a legacy, I am good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, doesn't that, I mean, it simplifies it, right? Because now you've got, I refer to values as our foundation, that foundational thing that we build off of. Everything that we do, whether it's subconscious or consciously, is based on our values. So why not understand what our values are so we can be more intentional with our values, more intentional with our decisions and our actions.
Yeah, it could even show, like, it explains my pet peeves. It explains everything. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that other organizations are really leaning into values and purpose, more than I thought. You mentioned that you're a transition coach. Do you have your own business or do you work with another organization?
Yeah, I have my own business, Tribe+Purpose. We are about helping people get clarity and resolve in their purpose and to build a tribe around it so they can have more success and fulfillment in life.
So how do they find you?
Our website is tribe-purpose.com. And
Awesome.
what I would love to throw out there, I write a weekly newsletter I call Monday Moments Newsletter. And if you go to tribe-purpose.com, click the Get Started button, then the next page that pops up, there's a button there to sign up for the newsletter. It's I am the gift of really cool names of things. That's why it's called Monday Moments. So it comes out on Monday. Uh, it starts off with a stoic quote for the week, something I learned, a planning thought, a business idea I thought of or heard of, a veteran opportunity, and then somebody I met. And I love sharing that. I love that opportunity. It kind of goes back to that, what I said earlier about there's nothing that I hate hearing hate hearing more than the fact that somebody did the same thing I did and ended up in the same crappy situation I did. I hate hearing that. I am huge on let me share my lessons learned. And that's why I write this Monday Moments is to share those life lessons for people.
And that's how we used to learn before we had, writings and stuff. It was storytelling,
Mhm.
before social media. It was sharing through our stories and we would learn from those. And then they would turn into fables and stuff, of course, that we learned from as well. Um, so I have really enjoyed having you on the podcast. I am going to let you have the final word. Do you have some final words for us?
Transition never ends. And if you're military transitioning out, you get to say no. And life is no longer linear. There is no linear path to the next thing. So don't think that you start in the mail room and then move to the supply room and then move to the junior manager to the senior manager to the V. It doesn't work that way anymore. Nothing's linear outside the military. So pursue what you want and begin movement.